Three teenagers, reeking of privilege and boredom, decided I was their morning's entertainment. They mocked my clothes, dumped coffee on me, and ground chewing gum into my hair. They had no idea that in less than an hour, I'd be walking onto a stage, looking out at their terrified faces, and introducing myself as their new high school principal. The air in the Daily Grind, a small coffee shop nestled strategically next to Jefferson High, was thick with the comforting aroma of roasted beans and warm sugar. It was a scent that usually calmed my nerves, but on this particular morning, a current of anxiety buzzed just beneath my skin. This was my first day, my first official act as the new principal of a school with a reputation as tarnished as old silver. I dressed down deliberately. Comfortable jeans, a simple shirt, and a cozy-looking beige cardigan, knowing my formal suit was waiting for me in my new office. My first order of business wasn't a staff meeting or a budget review. It was picking up a dozen donuts for the students in detention. I'd spent the previous night poring over their files, each one a heartbreaking story of neglect and systemic failure. The previous administration's notes were dismissive, labeling these children at risk or lost causes. I believed otherwise. I believed that kindness might just be the one strategy they hadn't tried yet. As I waited for the barista to box up the donuts, I sat at a small table, scrolling through the digital files on my phone, my mind already formulating intervention plans and support systems. I was so engrossed in a file belonging to a young girl named Jalen Hayes, whose record was a litany of minor infractions that screamed for help, not punishment, that I didn't notice them at first. They entered the cafe not like customers, but like conquerors. Three of them, all clad in the crisp navy and gold of the Jefferson High uniform, their entitlement a palpable aura. It was immediately, painfully obvious that these were not the children I had been reading about. The girl in the lead, whose name I would soon learn was Yvonne, carried a backpack with her name spelled out in gaudy rhinestones. Her phone, which she wielded like a scepter, cost more than my first car. She cast a disdainful glance in my direction as I stood to approach the counter. "Oh my God, look at this one," she whispered to her companions, her voice carrying across the nearly empty cafe with the clear, piercing quality of a ringing bell. Old people are so excruciatingly slow. She's been staring at that menu for, like, an eternity. She nudged the boy next to her, a lanky youth with a bored expression. "Liam, check out the squinting. She probably needs a telescope to read the board." I chose to ignore them, a strategy honed over years of dealing with adolescent angst. I placed my order for a simple latte and asked for the box of donuts I'd called in earlier. I just wanted to get my things and go, to avoid a confrontation in a space that was not yet my domain. But the sight of the large, pink donut box was apparently too much for Yvonne to bear. A peal of cruel laughter erupted from her. "Of course. A dozen donuts, are you serious?" she exclaimed, her eyes wide with mock disbelief. "Look at the size of her. She's definitely not sharing those. That's probably just her pre-breakfast snack." She sauntered up behind me, invading my personal space. "Let me guess," she continued, her voice dripping with condescension, "you also drive a minivan, right? Because there's no way you could squeeze into a normal-sized car." The third member of their trio, a broad-shouldered boy in a varsity jacket with Wyatt stitched across the back, pointed a finger at my cardigan. "Hey, that's the same sweater my grandma wears," he snickered. "She gets hers from the plus-size section, too." They took the table directly next to mine, a deliberate act of aggression in the otherwise vacant cafe. I tried to refocus on the student files, on Jalen Hayes and the others who needed me, but it was impossible. Yvonne had her phone out and was shamelessly taking pictures of me, the shutter click a tiny, repeated assault. "This is perfect material for my Fashion Disasters of the Suburbs Instagram story," she announced, zooming in on my practical, comfortable shoes. When the barista called my name, I stood, eager to escape. As I reached for my latte, Wyatt accidentally bumped into me with significant force. The hot coffee sloshed over my hand and cascaded down the front of my cardigan, soaking the printed-out files I had clutched in my other hand. "Oh, whoops. So sorry about that, lady," he said, his voice a perfect parody of concern. "But let's be honest, That coffee stain is a major improvement on that outfit." While I was frantically dabbing at the spreading brown stain with a napkin, my purse, which I'd left on the table, was suddenly snatched up. Yvonne was rummaging through it with a look of intense concentration. "Let's see what kind of boring, pathetic stuff old people carry around," she mused, pulling out my reading glasses. She perched them on her nose, exaggerating a look of intellectual curiosity. "Wow, these are like +10 magnification. You're basically a bat." I calmly reached out and took my glasses back from her, my heart pounding a steady, angry rhythm against my ribs. But they were just warming up. My phone buzzed on the table, and Liam, moving with a predatory quickness, snatched it. "Ooh, who's texting you?" he taunted, examining the lock screen. "Is it your book club? Or maybe your knitting circle?" He held the phone up for his friends to see. The text was from Margaret, my longtime administrative assistant who had transferred with me. "Margaret," Yvonne shrieked with glee. "Of course, your friends all have ancient old lady names." I reached for my phone, but Liam tossed it playfully to Wyatt, who feigned a clumsy fumble, letting the device slip through his fingers and clatter onto the hard concrete floor. I heard the distinct, sickening crack of the screen shattering.
"Oh dear."
"How clumsy of you," Wyatt said, directing his words at me as if I were somehow responsible. As I bent down to retrieve the broken pieces of my phone, I felt a strange, sticky sensation in my hair. I reached back and my fingers closed around a wad of freshly chewed bubblegum, which Yvonne was meticulously pressing and twisting into the strands at the back of my head. "There," she said, her voice a triumphant purr. "Now your hairstyle finally matches your personality." Completely stuck in the past. Her friends were filming the entire thing, their laughter echoing off the cafe walls, attracting the horrified stares of the few other customers and the young barista, who looked frozen in shock. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from my neck to my cheeks. Wyatt then chose that moment to trip while carrying his large iced coffee, sending the entire freezing, sticky contents cascading down my back. The cold liquid soaked through my cardigan and shirt in an instant, a shocking, icy violation. "Oh no," he cried with theatrical despair. "Well, at least now you have a good excuse to just burn that entire outfit." The situation escalated into the surreal when Yvonne produced a pair of scissors from her rhinestone-encrusted backpack. "Actually, let me help you with that," she said with a chillingly sweet smile. Before I could even process what was happening, she had snipped a large, jagged hole in the sleeve of my now coffee-stained cardigan.
"See?
"So much more fashionable," she declared. "Ventilation is very in right now." Finally, I had had enough. I gathered my dignity, the box of donuts, and my broken phone, and stood to leave. Liam immediately moved to block my path. He turned to the rest of the cafe and announced in a booming voice, "Everyone watch out. We've got a real-life Karen here. She's probably going to demand to speak to the manager and try to get us all fired." He then made a grand gesture of pulling a single dollar bill from his wallet and throwing it onto the floor at my feet. "Here's a tip for the morning's entertainment," he sneered. "Go buy yourself something nice. Like a personality." Yvonne began to chant, a playground taunt made vicious. "Carmen, Carmen, Carmen." A few other teenagers in the cafe, drawn to the drama like moths to a flame, tentatively joined in. As I finally pushed past Liam and reached the door, Yvonne followed me out into the parking lot. She gave me a hard, vicious shove from behind, sending me stumbling forward onto the asphalt. "Run along to your boring, worthless job," she screamed after me, her voice filled with a venom that was shocking in its intensity. "I bet you're a secretary or a librarian or something equally pathetic. My dad owns half this town, you know. He could buy and sell nobodies like you 100 times over." She then spat on the ground near my feet, a final, degrading gesture, before turning and sauntering back inside to the triumphant laughter of her friends. They stood clustered at the window, pointing and laughing as I, a middle-aged woman covered in coffee, with gum in my hair and a broken phone in my hand, walked steadily toward the imposing brick facade of Jefferson High School. An hour later, I stood in the wings of the auditorium stage, transformed. The sticky gum had been unceremoniously cut from my hair, leaving a noticeable, ragged chunk missing from the back of my head. My professional navy suit was immaculate, a stark contrast to the casual clothes I'd been wearing earlier, but the faint, brownish stain on the white blouse underneath was still visible if you looked closely, a small, stubborn reminder of the morning's assault. The vice principal, a man whose weary expression spoke volumes about the school's recent history, was at the podium. "And now," he announced, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space, "please join me in giving a warm Jefferson high welcome to your new principal, Miss Turner." I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked into the spotlight. The applause was polite, scattered, and disinterested. The typical first-day assembly reception. I let my eyes scan the sea of young faces, a blur of adolescent indifference, until they found them. Third row, center. Yvonne, Liam, and Wyatt. They were frozen, their mouths agape, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated shock. They looked as if they had just seen a ghost walk onto the stage. I stood at the podium in complete silence, letting the moment stretch, letting the weight of their realization sink in. 10 seconds felt like an eternity. I watched the blood drain from Yvonne's face, leaving her with a pasty, greenish pallor. I saw beads of sweat pop up on Liam's forehead, his shirt suddenly looking tight around the collar. Wyatt seemed to shrink inside his varsity jacket. The entire gymnasium had fallen silent, a palpable tension gripping the room as hundreds of students sensed that something significant and unscripted was happening. I slowly raised a hand and touched the spot where my hair had been cut. "As some of you may already be aware," I began, my voice calm and clear, carrying to the furthest corners of the gym, "I've had the unique pleasure of meeting some of our students already this morning." A few nervous, confused laughs rippled through the crowd. I clicked the remote in my hand, and the projector screen behind me lit up with a slide displaying the school's new, zero-tolerance anti-bullying policy in large, bold letters. "Starting today," I continued, my gaze fixed firmly on the third row, "these rules apply to everyone. There are no exceptions." I paused for effect. It doesn't matter who your parents are or how much money they have. A wave of whispers erupted across the bleachers. It was clear from the shifting eyes and furtive glances that everyone in that room knew the unspoken hierarchies of Jefferson High. I looked directly at Yvonne, who was clutching her rhinestone backpack to her chest as if it were a shield. "For my first official act," I announced, "I'm going to need 3 volunteers for a special project." My voice was pleasant, but unyielding. I raised my arm and pointed directly into the heart of the third row.
Yvonne.
"Liam,
And Wyatt.
please come up and join me on stage." They remained glued to their seats, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and disbelief. The vice principal, taking his cue, had to walk down from the stage and personally escort them, his hand on Wyatt's back practically propelling him forward. As they shuffled onto the stage, their faces a mixture of dread and defiance. I clicked the remote again. The slide with the bullying policy was replaced by the crystal-clear security footage from the daily grind, projected onto the massive screen for the entire student body to see. "Let's talk about what a culture of respect looks like at Jefferson High," I said, as the video began to play. "And let's talk about what it doesn't look like." A collective gasp swept through the gymnasium as the silent film of their morning's transgressions unfolded. The footage was damning. Yvonne meticulously grinding gum into my hair, Wyatt deliberately dumping coffee down my back, the glint of Yvonne's scissors as she cut my cardigan. Students all over the gym began reaching for their phones, eager to capture the downfall of the school's elite. "Phones away," I commanded, my voice sharp and authoritative. "This is not about public shaming. This is about accountability. It's about fixing the problems that have been allowed to fester in this school for far too long." I turned to face my 3 unwilling volunteers, who stood pale and trembling under the harsh stage lights. "You 3 will have the honor of being the first participants in our new community service detention program. It starts this afternoon at 3 o'clock sharp." I gave them a small, tight smile. "And I hope you like donuts. You'll be sharing them with the students I originally bought them for." The moment the assembly ended, my newly issued school phone began to vibrate incessantly. The caller ID displayed a name that was already infamous in the school's files: Tariq Ashley, Yvonne's father. His text messages, each more aggressive than the last, demanded an immediate meeting. I ignored them. I had more important work to do. I spent the next several hours sequestered in my office, delving deeper into the institutional rot of Jefferson High. File after file confirmed my worst fears, painting a grim picture of a two-tiered justice system. The children of wealthy, influential parents had their disciplinary issues: cheating, bullying, vandalism, mysteriously vanished from their records, while students from lower-income families were suspended for minor offenses like dress code violations or tardiness. A knock on my door brought me back to the present. It was Margaret, my rock-solid administrative assistant, carrying a folder so thick it looked like an encyclopedia. "I've been compiling this for 3 years," she said, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion as she placed it on my desk. I was just waiting for a principal who would actually have the courage to open it. I opened the folder. It was a meticulously documented chronicle of corruption: altar report cards, buried disciplinary reports, and, most damningly, evidence of scholarship funds designated for underprivileged students being systematically rerouted to wealthy families who made generous donations to the school. Yvonne Ashley's name appeared with sickening regularity. At lunchtime, I took the surviving donuts to the detention room, a bleak, windowless space where the school's usual cast of characters was assembled. I sat down with them, sharing the pastries and listening. Jalen Hayes, the girl whose file I'd been reading that morning, looked me dead in the eye, her voice quiet but unwavering, and told me how Yvonne and her friends had made her life a living hell since middle school, a campaign of relentless psychological and sometimes physical abuse that the previous administration had willfully ignored. The other students nodded in grim agreement. They all had their own stories. At precisely 3 o'clock, Yvonne, Liam, and Wyatt trudged into the detention room. The regulars stared, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and quiet satisfaction. The untouchables, the school's royalty, were actually facing consequences. I assigned them all the same task: cleaning the grime from underneath the cafeteria tables. Yvonne immediately began to whine about her manicure, but a single, pointed look from me was enough to silence her. To my surprise, Wyatt simply got to work, scrubbing with a grim determination, though he kept glancing nervously at his phone, no doubt imagining the social fallout. Liam looked as though he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. After detention, my meeting with the Lions commenced. Tariq Ashley was waiting in my office, his face a thunderous mask of indignation. Beside him sat Mario Weingrad, a slick, well-dressed member of the school board and a known Ashley family ally. They launched into a tirade about how I had humiliated their children, how my actions were unprofessional and detrimental to the school's reputation. I let them vent. Then, without a word, I turned my monitor around to show them the unedited coffee shop security footage. As they watched, I opened Margaret's folder and laid out the printouts documenting the scholarship fraud, with Tariq Ashley's signature on several key documents. The color drained from Mario Weingrad's face. He suddenly had very little to say. That night, Yvonne took to Instagram, launching a carefully curated smear campaign with the hashtag Principal Power Trip. She posted edited clips of the assembly, making it look like I had singled her out for no reason, portraying herself as the victim of a tyrannical new administrator. The response was immediate and not what she expected. Jalen and a dozen other students, emboldened by the day's events, started their own hashtag Jefferson Truth. They posted their own stories, their own experiences with bullying and the school's corrupt system. Within hours, the narrative had flipped. The entire community was talking about what really went on behind the pristine walls of Jefferson High. The next morning, I launched the free breakfast program. The cafeteria was filled to capacity with students who, I learned, often didn't eat until lunchtime, if at all. One of the veteran teachers, Carrie Snow, cornered me in the hallway, her face pinched with anxiety. "You're messing with the ecosystem, Principal Turner," she hissed. "We need the donations from those wealthy families to keep this school afloat." At lunch, I saw Liam sitting by himself, a pariah abandoned by his former friends. That afternoon, a local news van pulled up. Aurora McLawn, a well-known investigative reporter, wanted to talk about the dueling hashtags that had gone viral. I declined an interview, but she was already talking to students outside, her camera crew capturing the raw, unfiltered truth of their lives. Detention that afternoon was even more crowded. I had implemented a new see something, say something, do something policy, and teachers and students were finally reporting incidents that would have been ignored just days before. The newly detained wealthy students looked utterly bewildered that the rules now applied to them. After the session, Wyatt lingered. "My dad," he started, then stopped, the words catching in his throat. He spoke of the immense pressure to uphold the family's image, to be a star athlete, to be popular, to be ruthless. He couldn't finish the thought and walked away, but a seed of understanding had been planted. Day 3 brought an emergency school board meeting. The room was a tinderbox of parental fury. Tarek Ashley stood and demanded my immediate termination. He was met with a chorus of boos from other parents, who stood to defend my actions, sharing stories of their own children suffering under the old regime. Then Margaret stood up, her folder in hand, and systematically presented her 3 years of meticulously documented evidence to the entire board. The room fell into a stunned silence. Mario Weingrad announced a full, independent audit of the school's finances and disciplinary records. Several board members looked physically ill. That night, I found the word snitch spray-painted in garish red letters across the side of my car. The security footage was inconclusive, showing only a figure in a hoodie. The next morning, Liam was waiting outside my office. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He confessed that his family was on the verge of bankruptcy. They had been living a lie for years, pretending to be wealthy so he could fit in with the popular crowd. The pressure of it, he said, had made him cruel. I quietly enrolled him in the free meal program and connected his parents with community resources. He broke down in tears, telling me about other students he knew who were living the same lie, terrified of being exposed and targeted. The audit results were a bombshell, confirming the systematic redirection of scholarship funds. Tarek Ashley's name was on nearly every illicit transaction. At the next assembly, I announced that all school financial records would henceforth be a matter of public record. You could feel the collective panic of the wealthy parents in the back rows. Yvonne began showing up to detention in plain jeans and a t-shirt, stripped of her designer armor. She and Jalen worked at adjacent tables, a silent, unspoken truce hanging in the air. The state education department officially launched its own investigation into Jefferson High. Mario Weingrad resigned from the school board the same day. A week later, Wyatt quit the football team. His father stormed into my office, screaming about how I had ruined his son's future and the family's reputation. I ignored him and spoke directly to Wyatt, offering him an alternative, coaching a youth sports league as a form of community service. He accepted immediately, a look of profound relief washing over his face. Aurora McLawn's news story, Revolution at Jefferson High, aired that night. It was a powerful piece of journalism. "I finally feel safe here," a freshman girl told the camera. Another student looked directly into the lens and said, "Principal Turner sees us, the real us, not just our parents' bank accounts." The next morning, anonymous tips led to health inspectors showing up at 3 of Tarek Ashley's restaurants, shutting one of them down for numerous violations. He stormed into my office, his face purple with rage. "You did this," he bellowed. "You've made a powerful enemy, Turner. This isn't over." Later that day, I witnessed a quiet miracle in the hallway. Yvonne stood before Jalen Hayes, her head bowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." Jalen simply looked at her a long, searching gaze, then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod and walked away. Weeks turned into months. The breakfast program expanded to include dinner. Local businesses, hearing about the number of food-insecure students, began donating. Liam flourished as a math tutor for younger students, his old friends' taunts powerless against his newfound sense of purpose. The school board was completely overhauled, replaced by a diverse group of community members. The morning after the new board was sworn in, Yvonne Ashley withdrew from Jefferson High. She left an unsigned note on my desk. "I learned more than I wanted to. Detention had become a hub of restorative justice, a place of mediation and collaboration. 2 months in, the academic data came back. For the first time in nearly a decade, the grades of our at-risk students were on the rise. Carrie Snow, the teacher who had once berated me, came to my office and asked for my help.
I was wrong, she said.
Teach me what you're doing. Margaret was promoted to vice principal. The coffee shop incident became the stuff of school legend. The phrase, pulling a Turner, entering the student lexicon as a term for standing up to injustice. 6 months after my first day, I was back at the daily grind. The barista, with the green hair, recognized me instantly. My little brother actually likes school now, she said, handing me a latte on the house, a heart drawn in the foam. From my office window, I watched Wyatt coaching his team of kids, teaching them not just sports, but sportsmanship. His father still wasn't speaking to him, but Wyatt seemed freer, lighter, than I had ever seen him. Liam got into the honors math program. At the end of the school year, I was invited to speak at the state education conference. I brought Jalen and Liam with me. They told their stories, in their own words, to a packed auditorium of educators. Liam's confession of his own complicity was met with stunned silence, then a wave of applause. The ripple effect had begun. Schools across the state started implementing our programs. On the last day of school, I found a package on my desk. Inside was a brand new, expensive cardigan. The note was simple.
I'm sorry.
Wyatt stopped by to show me his college acceptance letter, an academic scholarship. Liam was headed to the state university's engineering program. As the final buses pulled away, Margaret and I reviewed the year-end statistics. Disciplinary infractions were down 78%. Academic performance was up across all demographics. We had done it. That evening, I stopped by the coffee shop one last time. As I waited for my latte, 3 Jefferson students came in. One was clearly wealthy, another's backpack was covered in patches, the third was somewhere in between. They sat down together and started sharing notes. The barista handed me my cup. In the foam, she had drawn a tiny graduation cap. "Congratulations on surviving year 1, she said with a grin. Later, in my car, a text from an unknown number buzzed on my phone. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to. Your first detention class." I smiled. There was still work to do, always would be, but we had started something. We had proven that a broken system could be fixed, one donut, one detention, one difficult conversation at a time.